So today we're learning the lessons in Tanya we're using for the Kuntres Acharon of the Alter Rebbe. We're middle of essay number 5. And we are at a very interesting example that the Alter Rebbe gives. The Nekuda that he explains here, that the point that the Alter Rebbe seeks to explain is that even in those parts of Torah that aren't frequent or will never happen because the technicalities that are necessary for them to be a violation of a mitzvahs lo sesei, a negative commandment like the ir anidachas, the disturbed and destroyed city. You have to wipe out a city because of its sins and idolatry, etc. And other examples aren't the details that are required to accomplish with verification that that's the case are so detailed that it'll never be. So if that's the case, what's the point of learning about it? And number two, how do we see the godly energy there too? That's one nekuda that he explains here. And while he does that, he goes into the whole concept of klippus. That klippus, that they're the life force of lo sesei. So that's where we're at now. I want to go right to the text here. And that is yeah. That is on page, we'll go back to 356. Yeah, that's what we're holding. We're actually holding 356 in Lessons in Tanya, where the Alter Rebbe is now about to give us an example. Va'afilu ha'masalsel b'saydai. Now this is, as far as I remember, the only place in Tanya where the Alter Rebbe talks about this. The idea of masalsel Tanya literally means he crinkles his hair. He plays with his hair. He makes hairdos, hairstyles. You know, when I was growing up, I heard from my father over and over, and he ingrained this into me and my brothers, that there are like three things, the three ABCs of being a Lubavitcher Chassid. One was, identifying with the Lubavitcher Rebbe, with the Rebbe, being his Chassid, following his directions and all of that, learning his Torah. Number two, that one needs to go to a Lubavitcher yeshiva. I'm telling you what my father said. He didn't take it from any Bible and any book. This is what he got from by osmosis, from learning 8 years in Chabad yeshiva in Lud from 1950 to 58. This is the walkaway, the takeaway. So the second thing was to learn in a Chabad yeshiva. And the third thing, not to have frontal hair. Not like people who are bald and don't have hair. We're talking about people who have hair, but they make nice hairdos, styles, because they want to look a certain way. And this was, I guess, from what my father picked up in yeshiva, this was a very ugly trait. I wouldn't call it even a trait. A very ugly behavior, which showed that there's something inside that's really a blockage to being a keli, a vessel for godliness and chassidishkeit and all of that. And mind you, we see that chassidim in general take very, very short haircuts. And we know that hair is associated, cyrus, as it's called in Kabbalah and Chassidus, is associated with the klippa. So therefore, you take off as much hair as possible. So some go to the, I don't want to say to the extreme, but some go to the point where they take everything off like a zero haircut, and some it's a 1 or 2, whatever. That's, but the idea is to remove the klippa. So when you play with your hair, you're entering a domain of klippa. Now, the Alter Rebbe, it's interesting that he mentions it here in this section of Tanya, because you would think, Isser, that there are worse sins. There's worse grievances than playing with your hair. But in real Chabad, in authentic Chabad, these things touch the very core of your connection. Because, as I said, Baruch, it's not just about the behavior of playing with your hair, crinkling your hair. It demonstrates something deeper that's going inside, that's happening inside you. And what is that? That your yesh, your ego, your arrogance is in control. That the physical appearance is more important than the spiritual refinement. Okay? This is a background to what the Alter Rebbe says here in very short words, but I felt since he mentions it, it's so important, it would be important to just elaborate a little bit so you have an understanding what he's getting at. So let's learn inside now. Even someone who crinkles his hair, and similar acts to this, the person at that moment receives their vitality, their energy, the klippas from the chambers of the negative energy, the klippas. As it says in Zohar HaKadosh, the Hilkach, and therefore, Gam protei ha'isurim shlei boli dei ma'asav me'olam, therefore, even the particular details that have never became practical issues in this physical world, nevertheless, sharshe chayusam heim b'metzias b'poel mamish b'echolos haklippas. The root of their life force is an actual metzius. Now, this is very important. This is the answer to the question, sir. The question is that in b'poel mamish is that there's no iranei dachas. B'poel mamish, this and this mitzvah will never happen because a mitzvah's lo sesei, because to get all the technicalities will never take place. It can't. It's an impossibility almost. So the Alter Rebbe says, I understand. Practically, they're not going to happen, but spiritually, they exist because you have to look at the root. Hear this, sir. You have to look at the root of the aveira. What is the trigger to the Aveira? Yaini. Every Aveira has a trigger. So someone who has an addiction, the trigger, there's something deeper going on inside. And if you could, deal with that and cure that and refine that deep issue that triggers the behavior will stop. Or at least be minimized. So that's what Alter Rebbe says. Look at his words. Heim b'metzios b'poel mamish. Very powerful words. They actually exist in the spiritual chambers of the klippas. V'gam haprotim sheyochel liyei sheloi hoyu v'lo yiyu me'olam b'metzios, and even those details that possibly never will be. Going to us v'shkogas, for example, errors and unwitting misdeeds, like when giving tithing, shetov v'kora l'chi asiri. When you ma'aser behema, ukai gavna, the way you did it with, you have to give the 10th sheep and of your sheep. So you stand there with a matzlif, something a die, and you count 1, 2, 3 as the sheep go by. And when it comes to the 10th, you splash the kind of paint on the animal to signify that this is the 10th. What if the person made a mistake and mistakenly he thought the 9th is the 10th, and he put the red dye, I believe, on the 9th sheep instead of the 10th. The Loshayach b'mezid, this kind of eventuality that cannot be deliberately as klippa sheid al zeh, and thereby cause a klippa to light upon it. Oh, one second. So the Alter Rebbe is like this. When it comes to usim, mistakes, something we're very familiar with, the word mistakes, ushkagos, accidental, unwitting misdeeds, right? Errors and unwitting misdeeds, right? In other words, you made a mistake. You counted the 9th sheep as number 10 when really it's not. It's number 9. So why is there some connection to klippa? Then the Alter Rebbe says as a sidebar, the l'shayach b'mezid. This concept, halachically is not applicable to an intentional sin, right? What's the law, Yoini? When does the Torah say you go to Ari Miklat, right? Not when it's b'mezid, when it's accidental. That's why it's the l'shayach b'mezid. This is not applicable to mezid. Leaves klippa sheid al zeh, for the klippa to rest upon it. V'yochali is the guy gavnin mitzias beicholas because possibly. Okay. Now the Alter Rebbe says here an astonishing thing. He says possibly. You don't find this in Tanya. He's kind of unsure. V'yochali is, it could be the kai gavnin in such a situation. Ein mitzias beicholas haklippas. In other words, like this. When it comes to a mezid, there's no escape route for a mezid. So the Alter Rebbe says, if that's the case, maybe by a mezid, there isn't a domain of klippas associated with it. It's like beyond the pale. 1 second. Now there's a Hagah here. There's a note from the Tzemach Tzedek. And he writes, Nidali Mashakosa v'Yochaliyos. It seems to me, the wording of my grandfather, he doesn't say grandfather, but it's Alter Rebbe's grandfather, where he says, possibly it may be, those words, possibly it may be, Almad leblirale. We see that it wasn't, the Alter Rebbe wasn't sure. It wasn't clear to him. Why not? Because accidental sins, mistakes, come from klippas noiga. Then we do have a route for them called the chambers of noiga. So that's why the Alter Rebbe is questioning and is unclear, at least here in his writing, that surely there's no chambers. He can't say for surely there's no chamber in klippa. Let's continue. In any event, it does exist. If not in klippas, then at least keeping in mind the distinction between having the sacred and the profane. In the supreme wisdom that was given to Moshe in Har Sinai. Okay. We have a chazal. The chazal say that every chiddush, every novelty that you come up with. So Baruch, you're teaching chiddush on Fridays, you told me, and as you prepare, a chiddush comes to you, a novelty, a novel idea. That chiddush was already given in a blueprint form to Moshe Rabbeinu on Sinai. Kol masher talmid vosik, osid l'chadish, whatever a future seasoned student will in the future come up with a novelty. Hakol nitna l'Moshe b'Sinai. Everything was given to Moses, to Moshe on Har Sinai. The whole protei by is the Rabbi Yirmiyah, the Gemara. There's a section called the queries, the questions of Rabbi Yirmiyah, who posed hypothetical possibilities that he was escorted from the house of study, as the Gemara relates. And the detail if he was wrapped up in Pedek Dalad Chul, and this is a different Gemaras. It speaks about he was wrapped. He was like, kind of quarantined. And it was hypothetical questions, and they took him kind of serious and all of that. The question over there was, look what it says here, whether a firstborn animal can be considered to have directly opened the womb and hence be sanctified in either of two hypothetical cases. According to Rashi, it's a question of what happens if the person assisting in the birth entirely wraps up the animal as it is born. According to the Rabbi Tam, Rashi's grandson, the question involves a multiple birth with a cow being born together with the firstborn bull and wrapping itself completely around it, something extremely unlikely to ever occur. Nevertheless, all of these detailed queries were given to Moshe at Har Sinai. For the extension of supernal wisdom is in the laws of Torah is infinite. Since it's actually clothed in it. And every detailed law comes from Chachma, supernal wisdom. The Yesod Barata, the founded, the daughter, So listen to this. Chachma is called father, right? In Kabbalah, Av is Chachma. Because Chachma is the seed, the Nakuda, the point, the idea. Bina is the mother. The mother takes the semen and develops it. So Bina is the developmental process. Chachma is Av and Bina is Ein. Malchus is the daughter. Brata is Aramaic for daughter. Malchus is known, as we say in Pasuk Eliyahu, Malchus Peh. Malchus is the mouth, which we call the oral Torah, right? Because we talk it out. It's not written. Chochmah then is clothed in the laws of the oral Torah, as they are to be found in their source in Malchus of Atzilus. So let's go back. Yesod Brata, Chochmi Lod Yesod Brata. The supernal wisdom finds itself in the daughter. You hear that? The daughter is Malchus. Brata is Malchus. So Chochmi Lo, which is Chochma, Chochem, Av, finds itself specifically in Brata, in Torah Shebal Peh, which you say out with your mouth. We continue, is clothed in it, and from Malchus, Chochma is drawn into Briyatzira Sira. The Alter Rebbe will now conclude by explaining how this brings about the refinement of the sparks. Remember, we're talking about that even in mitzvahs lo saseh, there's somehow the refinement of sparks, even though it's not proactive, it's passive. Lo saseh, don't do. And it continues. V'noida, it's known, ki yenikas ha-klippis, the nurturing of the klippis, machorayim the yud sfiras de kedusha, derives from the hinder part of the 10 spheres of holiness. Ubefrat milevushim the yud spheres de briyatzira, and more precisely from the garments of the 10 spheres of briyatzira. Ubefrat the yitzira vasiya muravim beli klippis, and more precisely, they derive their nurture from the garments of yitzira vasiya that are intermingled with klippis. So, in other words, the evil of the klippis in the world of yitzira vasiya are intermingled with the good. It's known that they receive their nurturing from the state of garments, and when one studies the laws in speech and in thought, Misparshim u'mispardim makdusha. They become separated and distinct from the sacred. As it says in Tikkunim, V'rayim sections of the Zohar, la'afrosha chulu, to separate, etc. The clip is from holiness through Torah study. When we study Torah, Isser, one of the accomplishments that we happen simultaneously is we separate the klippas. How does Torah accomplish the separation and refinement of the klippas when the issue of supernal wisdom originally in Torah was unable to affect this? And there came about the admixture of good and evil in the worlds of Atzir and Asiyah. This is according to what we know. Chazal say, Chazal say, and this is an answer to the prophet's query. Why was the land destroyed? Why was the land of Eretz Yisrael destroyed? And the answer is, for they did not recite the blessing before Torah study. What does that mean? Does that make sense to you? It doesn't make sense, right? Because of that, you destroy Eretz Yisrael. So the inner explanation, the deeper explanation is as follows. That people of those times failed to draw down the infinite light into the study of Torah because of their own ego. They didn't study Torah with anivus, with modesty, with humility. They studied with gaiva. They studied for a selfish reason. Evil cannot be separated from good by Torah alone. It must be studied in the proper manner. You hear that? This is such powerful words. Just by studying Torah, Baruch, doesn't yet remove the klippas that are found in the world. Because if you study Torah with gaiva and yeshus and ego and a sense of ego, that Torah study, unfortunately, has an association to klippas. The only way to get rid of the klippas is based on the Chazal, Baruchu b'Torah tchila. You have to first make a bracha. That's why in the morning blessings, Yoni, we say Birchas HaTorah. Why must we say Birchas HaTorah, sir? The answer is, so we think, because just like every mitzvah, before you do a mitzvah, you say a bracha. Before you eat an apple, you say Shakol Niyah B'Dvarei. Before you learn Torah, which is a mitzvah, to learn Torah, you say a bracha. But the Alter Rebbe explains, and explained at length in other places in Chassidus, it's much deeper. It's because otherwise the Torah, without the humility, without you having humility, when you learn Torah, your Torah is associated with klippas. And Baruch b'Torah tchila means recognizing that this Torah is Hashem's Torah, and you're a nobody, and you have a schus to learn it and to expound upon it, but don't become big from it, a big shot, v'chulu. When Shelei Baruch b'Torah tchila means not that they didn't actually say the blessing in the morning or whatever before they learned. Of course they did, but they didn't connect with the deeper idea of a bracha, which means recognition that it's Einoid Milvada and all of that. So that's what he says here. That these klippas won't be released from the Torah study until it's Baruch b'Torah Tchila. Let's continue. This is by drawing down the infinity of God and Chochmah, which is enclosed in them. Chochmah sorts out the klippas because the infinite light that's within Chochmah is equally true regarding the study of laws of prohibiting, and this is his answer. This idea doesn't make a difference to whether you're studying Torah about mitzvahs aseh or mitzvahs lo saseh, positive or negative commandments. Even those that most probably will never occur are still infused with the infinity of Chochmah law. For the Torah study itself accomplishes this purification. And this light is drawn into the supernal wisdom Ha'oisik gam came ba'alochis elu l'mayla, that by the supernal likeness of man who's occupied with these laws above. When we learn, Hashem learns as well. When a man studies Torah, his source above, I call it Hashem, but his source above engages in Torah study as well. This is Kabbalistic, locations in the source of the Nukva, the feminine of Zah, the B'yitzirasira. So, what we have over here, Chavra, is a very interesting approach to Torah study. Listen, halavai, we would learn a lot of Torah, but the Alter Rebbe gives you the truth. He wants you to know from the very beginning that if you're learning Torah with an agenda, it's klippa. And we've seen this in history. We've seen this and we see this. People who somehow take the Torah and they have an agenda, whatever that agenda is, that Torah study creates klippa. And if it creates klippa, it's negative energy. It's not good for you. It's not good for the world. So there needs to be a sense of humility. Generally speaking, Hasidim have less of this issue than others. Litvisha people, Litvisha people are always into the chidush, the novelty. They say about the brisker, they go over to a Rambam and they roll up their sleeves. Now I'm going to take apart a Rambam. So of course it's a saying, but the thought is what counts. Yes, sir. What?
I happened to meet somebody once who was a dropout from Lakewood. And when I say a dropout from Lakewood, I mean he was a mash. He was a Kolel. No, Kolel. I don't think he was married, but he was a Gears in Lakewood. And it got to him that the whole point was to upslug somebody else. There was a contest. Who can upslug? And he said they would even talk down about the Rosh Hashiva in their own learning, that they were like upslug. It was an old contest. Who could be the best? Like, who could have the best argument? And he said he became so turned off by the whole thing that it really destroyed him.
Look, Chas v'sholom to say there aren't people, in Lakewood and Ponovich and Mir and the Litvish yeshivas that are learning Torah without, I'm not saying gaiva and ego, but when you seek to be machadish, when you seek to be novel, automatically the ego comes. It's in everything in life, right? So in other words, the territory, the mechanism of style and flavor and culture in these communities lends itself more to this, ego-oriented Torah. By Hasidim, there's a big emphasis on the bittul, on the, kind of the obliteration of self. Even though we have plenty of gaiva, plenty of yeshes, I'm not going to go into it now. But nevertheless, in this aspect, Hasidim have this sensitivity more to the Einoid Milvadoi, or at least one, you know what I'm saying? So this is what the Alter Rebbe said here. Chavra, we will continue tomorrow. Mitzvah Shem. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye. Thank you.